Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are back on the dev server for Alpha Strike, and it's time to have a look at the new Hungarian subtree, which is coming in for Italy. Now, there really isn't any kind of unique vehicles in this subtree yet, but you never know in the future. They might add a few, and also I believe on one of the sneak peek streams, they did talk about more Hungarian vehicles being added in the future, especially when it comes earlier in this line. So, what we're going to do in this video is have a look at the Hungarian tech tree and all that it is on offer. We'll go left to right, just to make it a bit easy. The first one is the IL-10. This is the Parduk. So what it has access to is the 20mm in the back of the turret here, the BT-20, and also the 23mm NS-23s looking forward. So it doesn't have a 23 in the back or anything too crazy. It also has access to two 250 kilo bombs or the standard rockets, the M13 UKs, the M8s or the RBS 132s or 82s. So if you ever wanted to see a good old IL-10 in Hungarian colours, this is where you will find it. Also, this is the only aircraft which is in this line which is Hungarian. The rest of them are in the two right-hand lines. The first one being an extension of the Italian bomber line. We have the Tu-2S 59, which is the exact same as one of them in the Soviet tech tree. The only difference is, for some reason, this one is lower BR. The one in the Soviet tech tree is 6.0, this one is 5.7, and you can see by the beautiful green camouflage here, it is definitely Hungarian. I also really like the kind of propeller heads that we have here. I think they look really cool. And in flight, they look really nice as well. So they've done a pretty good job with the camos, even though the vehicles themselves aren't that different. You also have the 1,000 kilo bombs for the Tu-2, so 3 individual bomb drops that you can bring along and just annihilate stuff. This will be great in ground forces, but also pretty easy to grind out in stuff like air forces as well. Following the bomber line, we have, of course, the IL-28. This is a vehicle which has been farmed out to pretty much every Eastern Bloc nation in the world. The IL-28 is no different when it comes to Hungary, apart from the markings on it. It has a 23mm set of cannons in the front. It has a dual turret in the back of the 23mm variety, and then also access to a bunch of weird bomb loads, I think is probably the best thing to say. The bomb loads in the IL-28 are no good. They're very odd and don't really fit a lot of the game. The only place that they're pretty decent with is basically in ground. If you use a 3,000 kilo and just on a conquest map, you can kind of annihilate stuff. So at least there's that that you can have a bit of fun with. Then the Su-22 M3 is coming in. This is one of the weaker SU variants in the game, only second to probably the first Su-17, which is really rough to play. So this Su-22 M3 is already also in the game. It's in the Soviet tech tree and it's the squadron vehicle. In there, it is actually the Syrian Su-22 M3. This one is the Hungarian one. Is there a difference between them? No, I don't think there is. So the vehicle itself has a lot of different weaponry options, including our 60s, then also a bunch of rockets, bombs, incendiary bombs, and also some pretty interesting rockets/missiles, depending on who you ask. It also has the good old KH-23Ms, the M-Close missiles as well, and then it has some gun pods too. So it has quite a lot of ordnance options, not really any that really fit, but good enough, especially when it comes to ground forces. Also has CCIPs and CCRPs and an RWR up the wazoo, and its main issue is the fact that it doesn't really have any countermeasures. This is a huge beast, it's a massive heat signature, and at the BR that it's at, you run into a lot of pretty good missiles, and this thing only has 12 large caliber countermeasures, so that doesn't really work very well, and usually you don't get to the target. It has a dual or two 30mm NR30s as well here, and a big old engine that gives a lot of power out, but generally doesn't work very well. So for the bomber line, that's pretty much it. You have the Tu-2S, the IL-28, and the Su-22 M3, and also the IL-10 over here. For the fighter line, which is much more exciting, we have the Yak 3P to start with. Oh, sorry, not Yak 3P, Yak 9P, that is around. This vehicle was used post-World War II by Hungary, and it is once again in the Soviet tech tree already in the game. The cool thing about the Yak 9P is it has an engine that constantly likes to overheat, even though it puts out a lot of power, and at the same time, you have a bunch new cannons which you can get on it. So the Yak-9P in the Soviet tree is exactly the same as this, but you can pick between having a 37mm with 220s or a 23mm with 220s, or just 3 20mm, which I think is kind of cool. The fact that that exists on this vehicle, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want and how to play it, I like that. I think that's quite nice. The next one in the line is the MiG-15 BIS. So this one's at 8.7, and it's probably the strongest fighter at 8.7 at the moment. It's at rank 5 as well, and it's just another copy of the Soviet vehicles. This is the third MiG-15 BIS that we have in the game. It has probably one of the weakest armaments in the game for jets, but it has some of the best flight characteristics. It holds energy really well. It doesn't snap when it goes at high speeds. The only thing it does is it compresses really hard, so you've got to be careful of that. But overall, it is quite a joy to fly. The major issue is 9.3 being quite a volatile BR, so the 8.7 BR doesn't really match up too well with it, and you kind of get nuked in it, which isn't very fun. But the MiG-15 BIS is quite enjoyable, and would recommend it. Then you have the MiG-17 PF, so you may think, oh, cool, our first vehicle that is unique out of them. Nope, this is the LIM-5P, just by a different name. The MiG-17 PF is the afterburning MiG-17 with the Klimov VK1, and also access to the all-weather kind of attack through this radar, the RP5. The RP5 is a pretty bad radar in all intents and purposes in the game, but the afterburner is quite nice, and it also has access to 323mm. I really actually like the LIM-5P in the German tech tree, so I'd probably enjoy this in the Hungarian part of the Italian tech tree, but we'll have to see what kind of goes on with it. It doesn't have an RWR or anything like that, just has the afterburner and the 23s to keep it going. It also, since it is kind of a interceptor, it doesn't have any ground ordnance or anything like that. Then we have the MiG-21MF. This is a complete copy of the German one, and if you actually have a look at the MiG-21MF in the German tech tree, and also a lot of the other vehicles in the German tech tree, you'll see a lot of similarities. So a lot of people compare this one to the MiG-21 SMT, which I think is kind of a fair comparison, but they aren't the same vehicle. There is a huge difference between them that you'll only really find when you play them. So you see where you have the MiG-21 SMT, looks like this, right? So if you have a look at the MF, what you'll find is this bit is slightly different. So you can see how this is, it's a bit more thicker on the top of the SMT compared to the MiG-21 MF that you find here, and then also in the German tech tree. And this basically means that the MF actually flies a lot nicer in terms of how it's set up in the game. So it actually dogfights a lot better, meaning that it's easier to get the guns on the target, and also at the same time the air-to-air missiles. The MiG-21 MF has access to countermeasures. It has a countermeasure pod, and then also it gets access to R60s. It also gets R3Rs and R3Ss, depending on how you feel. But for me, I think the R60s is the way to go. It does have a little bit of ground ordnance, but nothing too crazy, so it won't really work. But as somebody who's spaded the MF and the SMT, these vehicles at 10.3 are really fun to play. Highly recommend them, and once again, a nice vehicle for Hungary. Then you got the BIS-SAU. The BIS-SAU, the big difference between it and the earlier MiG-21s, it has a new engine, the Tamansky R25-300, which gives it a lot more thrust. You also have access to the Model Sapphire 21 radar, and then a RWR, which is okay, not really the best, but it's there. And also all aspect R60s. So you get 6 R60 MKs. The MKs are the export version of the Ms. They're exactly the same, no difference between them or anything. Then you have the R3Ss, 3Rs, you also have the R13Ms and the R60MKs. So depending on what you really want to bring, you can bring some semi-actives if you want, but I think it's generally better just to bring the R60s. I feel like if you wanted to, you could maybe bring a R13 with the R60s if you can, so you have a little bit of long range and then a little bit of short range compared to it. So the Bissau is in a pretty nice position, but limited in terms of its armament. MiG-23MF is in exactly the same position. This one actually has a really cool skin on it though. So that's definitely something to look at. As somebody who has just spaded the MiG-23M, which is a complete copy of this, by the way, there is no difference, at least from what I have been able to find, between the MiG-23M and the MiG-23MF. It has problems with its armament again. The R60Ms, even though they're all aspect, are very sensitive to countermeasures, and the R23Ts and the R23Rs, it's probably easier just to throw a boot at the enemy instead of throwing these missiles. They are really rough because they take a long time to start tracking the target, and by that point, usually the target has been able to move instead of just stand still in the middle of the air. The speed of this thing is really good. It only has 12 countermeasures, but that to me wasn't a huge issue. The engine is really nice, and also it has access to the wonderful 23mm cannon, which is awful. So overall not great, and also has a pretty weak RWR at the same time. Then MiG-29. This is the 912B. So it's a lot similar to the first MiG-29 that came into the game instead of the later ones. It has 60 countermeasures. It also has access to the R27ER1s, which is really nice, and also the R60MKs. This vehicle doesn't get the R73s, so only the R60MKs, and that kind of sucks for it, since obviously would do better with the better missiles, and it does get the T1s of the R27 variety, not the ETs, which kind of sucks. But yeah, these missiles are really good. The R60s at this BR, not very good, but I suppose if you're going dogfighting, there's not really much else to get apart from the R73s. So you have the 30mm as well on the vehicle. You have a much better radar compared to the earlier MiGs, and also a much better RWR, which is a huge difference between these two sets of vehicles. Has, of course, the Klimov RD-33s, so it should be able to motor around the place, and the extra fuel tank, which is cool to see too. And then the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme. It's the Yas, another Gripen. This is the JS39 EBS HUC. This is the Hungarian this is the Gripen that the Hungarians lease from the Swedish, and it's the one that they use in their general setup. What's kind of cool about this one is the secondary ordnance. So even though it's very similar to the C, which we've seen in other places, what it has access to is a bunch of pretty fun sets. So it has those countermeasure plus Sidewinder combos. It does have the AIM-9Ms and also the Sky Flashes, so exactly the same as the standard Gripen. You also have the Lightning II pod and also the Paveways, which is pretty cool. Then on top of that, you have these Mavericks. So these are slightly different than what we've seen before on other vehicles. First of all, you have the AGM-65G. So what are these? Well, these are actually SAP-HE warhead AGMs. They have an IR guidance on them, but they have a massive warhead on them. The TNT equivalent of 46.45 kilos. Absolutely huge. They don't really pen a lot though, so these will be better against targets which have less armor, but also at the same time you want to kind of overpressure or do a bunch of damage to. They'll definitely do a lot against AAs and stuff like that, and probably other similar machines. Then you have the AGM-65Hs. Now these ones are kind of cool too, because they actually are looking like this, which is quite nice. And what these are, the AGM-65Hs, they are TV guided, they have a lot of penetration, and also a massive amount of TNT equivalent too. So 51.19 kilo TNT equivalent. It's a heat warhead, so it'll penetrate through with anything that it's able to. So yeah, pretty decent at the end of the day to be able to bring these along. So this gives a really good CAS option for the Italians at high tiers if you want to up tier your Arietes into 12.7 if you really feel like it, but also it gets all these standard factors that make these types of vehicles good in terms of the other Gripens as well. The Gripens are really good right now. This one is no different. It is very positive when it comes to the game. One of the things to also note is the lightning pod is actually on a different pylon to everything else, so you can take the lightning pod alongside other ordnance and you don't lose a hard point, which is huge. That's a massive thing. You also can take, of course, the fuel tanks with the good old Tiger on them, or Lion, whichever it is. Always get those two mixed up. But yeah, so you can take a bunch of different stuff, which is really nice. So that is the Hungarian part of the Italian tech tree. A lot of Soviet machines, and then also a Swedish edition, and I think overall pretty good. There isn't a vehicle here which I'm miffed about, maybe the Su-22, but everything else looks pretty nice. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Schnitzel Stroker, Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, B. Young, Opium Prime, Masonocrat, Lafouche, Alan Hacker, Sam Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.